know that you would be leaving me just like the winter snow. Tell me and be honest. Tell me, should I've known that you'd be leaving me so painfully quiet and slow? I try my best to move on, to let go. They say time is a healer, just you wait and see. The problem is for me, I need an eternity. So tell me and be honest. Tell me, did you know that you would be leaving me just like the winter snow? watching the stars in the city light. Right from the start, that we never grow apart till we die. Wanna leave you now, never ever let you go till we die. Surrounded by the colors of the picture side, watching all the others fall into the night. Starts to shake with your lonely hand. Winter time to spring, I remember everything from Wichita. This town is on its knees, you know God is overseas, I'm telling ya. Oh, it's more to this than what you see. You know this town's got the best of me. Are we sure it's the last time? Sure that this is the last time.
How do I do?
Oh, we were down by the river all through the night, watching the stars in the city light. And all the moods in a heartbeat. We're going back where it all began. The same ground under our feet.
Oh.